Hey, how's it going everyone? It's Evil Mug here, back with another build guide. This one's for Supply Moisture Valby, who has just been amazing at Onslaught. I've been using her to hard carry lobbies on level 3 Onslaught. She just melts everything. Tyrants, bosses, of course normal enemies, and yes, even Colossi. I even shredded a Colossi and defeated it in 16 seconds. That guy didn't even get a phase 2, and this was on level 3 Onslaught. She has just been phenomenal at Onslaught since the patch. Now, if you guys don't know what Supply Moisture does, I'm going to throw it up on the screen there, so go ahead and pause and read if you need to. But she has just been so much fun. Now, there's one thing you guys need to realize though with Supply Moisture Valby. There is a unique interaction with her third ability, that if you don't know about it, you will lose about 2/3 of your damage. Now, I go over this in the tips and tricks section, so make sure to watch that so you guys don't lose any damage and understand that mechanic better. But that's enough of me yapping. Let's go ahead and get you guys into this build guide so you can get out there with Valby. And as always, we'll go ahead and start off with our mod section, where I'll go ahead and break down all the mods and how they fit into the overall build. And starting off our mods will be our crit section. And yes, this does mean we're going to make Valby a crit character this time, with our first module being front lines. Now we want this one because it gives us both crit rate and crit damage, which is two stats we definitely want. We want the crit rate to be able to have a higher chance at hitting a critical hit chance. And we also want the crit damage because, well, damage is king in first Descendant, and so we want more damage. The next up is emergency measures. This is similar reason to front lines. It gives us both skill crit rate and skill crit damage, so we really want it. Then we're going to go skill concentration as our next one. Now, we want this one because this gives us the highest crit damage out of any non-Ancestor module in the game, so we're definitely taking that to get our highest DPS output possible. And then our final crit mod is going to be Skill Insight. I want this one, since Valby has a really low base crit rate, we need to try and ramp it up as much as possible, so that we'll have the highest chance of hitting a crit we can get. Now, some people may be wondering, why are we making this build a crit build? Considering Valby's base crit is something like 5%, and usually that's a good indication to not run a crit build. Well, that actually comes down to how fast your third ability procs, and this whole build is built around your third ability, which enhances your bullets for your gun. And that ability can proc every 0.1 seconds, which means it's really fast to be able to get to trigger again. And this means for something like crit, where we have about a 25% chance with this build, 24 to 25% chance crit rate. If you're hitting a crit every 1 out of 4 shots, the total damage for that 1 crit shot and the 3 non-crit shots still add up to more damage than if you were to run a non-crit build. So it makes more sense to run a crit one in this case. Now, usually that logic isn't always sound in, actual gameplay, since most characters, if you're trying to go a partial crit build, you have something like a 5-second gap in between casts. So in those cases, it feels really bad because if you don't land the crit, you often don't kill the enemy. So usually you go non-crit because you'll get the guaranteed damage to be able to defeat the enemy, or at least do some decent damage within a couple casts. It's also one of those cases of you need to be able to defeat that enemy within that, for example, that 5-second cooldown cast. You can't just sit there, waiting 5 seconds to be able to kill that enemy when more enemies are going to show up. But in this case, we're able to do it because with that 0.1 second trigger rate for your damage, you have plenty of time. A 0.4 second pretty much guaranteed crit within that is going to kill the enemy, and you can move on to the next, and you're going to be able to defeat that enemy before the next one spawns. It's just one of those things of crit versus non-crit argument. I could go into a large discussion about this, but this is the basic general premise of it is, because you're able to re-trigger it fast enough, it makes sense to run crit rate here. If you have too much of a gap in between casts, and not a very good crit rate, it doesn't make sense to run crit rate. This is one of the few cases where mathematically it's more damage, and it's a realistic way you can get more damage. But once again, that going to a huge discussion for that could be a whole nother video, and would take too much time to go into the 10-20 minute discussion that would take for that one. But that is the short version of why we're going to run crit in this build. But crit won't be the only way we're going to increase Valby's damage. It turns out all of Valby's abilities also scale off MP, so we're going to run some MP mods here, starting with HP conversion. Now running HP conversion because this gives you the largest amount of MP increase out of any module that's a non-ancestor module. And yes, we are going to be using HP as our main defensive value, but we'll make up for this decrease in HP in other places in our build where we increase our HP. Then next up is Enlightenment. It's just your basic MP module, no downside, and gives you a good amount of MP. And then our final one is going to be MP Accelerant. Now we're actually running this for two reasons. The first reason is it gives us MP. The second reason is it also gives us duration, which is really good on Valby, because even though your third ability is an infinite cast that doesn't have to worry about duration, what you really want it for is the puddles that all your other abilities create. So to trigger Valby's passive, which gives you a whole bunch of increased stats to gun, damage, and also gives you ammo back, you need to be sitting in one of the little puddles that her other abilities create. You'll see like a little pool of water on the ground. And we want that to last as long as possible since we're running no cooldown in this build. So that we'll just get our infinite ammo back and our increased stats. So this just has that double value in this module, which we really, really like. Now, if all this MP that we're running will hit about 635 MP, and the max damage Valby can get from MP is at when you have the MP value at 650. So we're only 15 MP off, which actually doesn't cause that significant of a damage difference. It's actually very, very minor. For reference, at 635, you're hitting around 195 damage, 0.58. So 195.58 versus the max damage, which is 200. So less than a 5% difference in damage increase is not significant. But we can technically make up for this difference later in our Ancestor module, but in all honesty, it'll be pretty low priority because there's plenty of other ways that you massively increase damage over that measly less than 5%. And of course, beyond our MP and our crit, we're still going to increase our damage through our skill power. And for this one, we're just going to run power increase, which will increase our base skill power. Now, why are we increasing just normal skill power over non-attribute skill power? Well, that's because our components, which we'll talk about later, will already give us plus 84% non-attribute skill power, and generally the rule is you want to try and balance out your skill power increase pools, since there'll be separate ones for non-attribute skill power and fusion in this case. So you want all three of those pools to be about level. That's what we're trying to do here. So power increase will be your best one to use here. And then our next mod is going to be our HP module, which will just run increased HP because this gives you a large amount of HP with no downside. And we'll be using HP as our main defensive stat. And then for our Ancestor module, as usual, we'll go ahead and move that to its own section, where we'll go ahead and take every stat you can roll in our Ancestor module, break them down, and put them into a tier chart that you guys can use to reference if you want to keep that Ancestor module, or if you want to go ahead and re-roll it. So if you guys want to jump to that right now, there's a link in the description, and there's also a link in the timestamp of the video itself. And now with all of our main modules out of the way, let's go ahead and get into our trigger module. And there are technically multiple trigger modules you could run for this build, but the best one that's going to give you the highest damage increase is going to be Gap in Time. And it's because Gap in Time works off normal AoE abilities, and your third ability, which is going to be pretty much all your damage, is a normal AoE type ability. And the nice thing is Gap in Time just gives a 35% increase in damage to it. So what will happen is you'll see one proc of damage, which will be, for example, maybe like 100 million. And then you'll also see another proc of damage occur with that will be another 35 million, giving you 135 million damage in that kind of case. And this is incredibly huge. A 35% damage on your final damage value is just insane. Now, people may be wondering, well, why don't more builds run this? Well, Gap in Time also has the other effect that its proc rate, or how much it triggers, is inverse of your cooldown. So the more cooldown rate you have, the less chances to proc this. But because we only really care about our third ability in this build, which is an infinite cast, so we don't need any cooldown, we run 0 cooldown, meaning we get 100% trigger rate on Gap in Time, meaning we just get a for free permanent 35% damage increase for all of our abilities, which is insane. It out damages any module you could possibly run in that case. So that's why we run Gap in Time. And now time for the last of our mod sections, the Ancestor mod section, where we'll go ahead and take every stat you can roll in your Ancestor module, break them all down, and throw them into a tier chart to help you guys determine if your Ancestor module is good, or if you want to go ahead and reroll it. Now, starting off with S tier, which is going to be our best tier, we have Fusion Skill Power Boost. Now, this is probably the best stat you can roll out of anything, because we really don't have any Fusion Skill Power throughout the build, or at least not very much. So rolling this here, even a little bit, will help kind of bring it closer to the other skill power pools that we have, which will give you a massive damage increase. Then we have Skill Critical Hit Rate. Now this is really good because, once again, Valby doesn't have very high crit rate, so increasing that at all by any portion of it can largely increase your damage by making it more consistent, which is really good. We want a more consistent high damage DPS value. And then Skill Critical Hit Damage is really good because, well, that just increases our damage by a lot. And then going on to A tier. Now A tier is still really good stats. We have non-attribute skill power boost ratio. Now this one will increase your damage by quite a bit, just not as much as Fusion, because we already have a lot of non-attribute skill power from our components, but it's still a good damage increase. Then we have Skill Duration Up. Now, I explained this back in the mod section. This will affect your puddles that you throw on the ground, and by standing in those, you get a whole bunch of stat boosts that increase your gun and allow you to get infinite ammo. So having those last longer on the ground is always a good thing, so you can have an easier time keeping up your passive. And then we have Max MP. Now, while increasing your Max MP won't increase your damage by too much, it will give you an okay damage increase. It'll be less than 5%. We talked about this in the mod section, because we're only a little bit under what the max MP damage value is. So it won't be much, but it is damage. And then Max HP, because, well, it's a good defensive stat and it's the main one we're focusing on. And then going on to our middle of the pack values, we have Fusion Skill Modifier. Valby is a fusion character, of course, but the reason this is kind of in B tier is because our third ability, which is the one we're focusing on for damage, already has a modifier of 1,700. So increasing that at all doesn't really increase your damage really at all. It's nowhere near as much as anything in A or S tier will. And then we have defensive value here in B tier. Now, this is just a good value to have no matter what. Increasing defense means you take less damage. It's just not as good as many other values, but it's a nice solid value. And then moving on to C tier. Now, C tier is the values you just want to avoid no matter what. They would hurt the build if you took them as a negative, but if you took them as a positive, they really wouldn't help the build. So you just kind of want to permanently avoid these stats. Now, luckily, we only have one stat here, and that's skill cost. That's because to keep your third ability going, it does continuously consume MP. But the build already kind of naturally has enough MP regen to keep up with this and more, so you'll never really run out of MP, especially in Onslaught where they give you increased MP regeneration, so you don't really ever have to worry about this. But if you were to take this as negative, you could potentially just drain out your entire MP pool, and then your third ability will deactivate, and that just doesn't feel good. So just avoid this value. And then our final tier is D tier. Now, D tier are the values that don't help the build at all, and they don't hurt the build at all, so taking it as a positive does nothing, and taking it as a negative won't hurt the build at all. So they're perfect values to take as negatives, so you can increase the stats you get from your positive values. So starting this one off is skill cooldown. We talked about this before. We don't really need cooldown at all in this build. In fact, taking cooldown as a positive would hurt the build because of Gap in Time. So we're perfectly okay with taking it as a negative value because, well, the only thing we really care about is our third ability, and throwing out our other abilities every once in a while, but we don't really need to worry about that too much. Then, Dimension Skill Power Boost Ratio and Dimension Skill Modifier. Valby has 0 dimension scaling in this build, so you can just get those stats out of here. They don't matter. Then Max Shield, we're focusing on HP, so we just don't care about shields. And then Skill Effect Range. Now this one's interesting. So technically your third ability does have an AoE, but it has no scaling on the range. It's just a flat range value that you can't increase or decrease. And the only thing this would affect is technically the size of your puddles that you throw on the ground for your passive. But as long as Valby just has like a pinky toe in the puddle, it'll activate your passive. So you really don't care about the size of those. As long as they're on the ground, that's all that matters. So we're fine with putting this in D tier and taking negative skill effect range. Now that's going to wrap it up for the Ancestor mod tier list. Hopefully this will help you guys determine if you want to keep those Ancestor modules or get rid of them. And now with all of our module sections out of the way, let's go ahead and get into our Arche Tree. Now our Arche Tree will be fairly unique this time, because we're trying to hit a lot of things. So first off, we do want to grab those 2 HP nodes at the bottom, get some more defensive values. But pretty much everything we're going to be hitting here is we're trying to hit every purple MP node we can, along with hitting skill crit rate, skill crit damage, and also hitting skill power nodes along the way. This will give us the largest damage increase, since we're trying to get as much MP as possible, along with skill crit damage and also skill power. Stacking all these gives us a humongous amount of damage. Now, for your Mutant Cell, we're going to run Arche Chain Catalyst. Now, the reason we're doing this is because a lot of enemies on Onslaught have very high resistance, and this helps shred them, along with stacking on top of your Laundry passive, which also reduces resistance. You'll be able to shred through enemies fairly easy with this. And also, because of the unique interaction with your third ability, which we'll go over in the tips and tricks section, which I highly recommend watching, you can't really update your third ability's damage too easily since it locks in all of its buffs, without having to deactivate and reactivate it. There is a way to do that fairly easily, without putting it on cooldown, but once again, I'll show that off in the tips and tricks section. But because of all that, Arche Chain Catalyst is going to be your best Mutant Cell here. And for the components that you'll be running in this build, will be Enlightened Mage set, and that's because it gives an additive 84% non-attribute skill power, which is a huge amount of skill power to get from a component set. So you really want that because that'll largely increase our damage. Now there's one thing you guys need to know about. There is an interesting interaction with infinite cast / toggleable abilities, like Valby's third ability in this build. Now I go over this interaction in the tips and tricks section, which I really recommend watching, because if you don't know how this interaction works, you will lose about 2/3 of your damage. But if you do the interaction correctly, you get a lot of cool benefits from it. So make sure to watch the tips and tricks section so you guys can fully get that interaction later in the video. Now, for your substats of your component set, the ones you're going to want to run is Max MP, MP Recovery Modifier, and MP Recovery in Combat. Don't forget, MP is a really important stat on Valby now. And then we're also going to want HP, just for defensive values. Now, for your component cores, what you're going to want to run is 4 max HP cores. This is because, once again, we're using HP as our main defensive stat. And then for your other 4 cores, you're going to want to run at least 2 defensive cores. And you'll have 2 free cores, so you can pretty much put in whatever you want to, depending on what you're fighting. If you're fighting fire enemies, you get fire resistance, electric enemies, electric resistance, so on and so forth. Or if you want a good general set, you can just throw in 2 more defensive cores. This just makes it really good across the board. And now time for our Inversion Reinforcement. So our first one we're going to run here is Adrenaline Surge, and that's just because more movement speed is always good. Then we're going to run Precision Shot, and that's because Valby works best with crit-based guns, and this just increases crit-based guns' damage whenever you get a crit, so it's a really good one to run. And then finally we're going to run Deployed Hardened Shell, and this is just because this causes you to take percentile decreased damage, which is good, since when you get onto things like Onslaught, they do a lot of damage, so reducing it by a percentage is really recommended. And now let's go over the reactor for this build. So we'll be running a fusion non-attribute reactor, and that's because Valby is a fusion non-attribute character. And for our substats, we'll be running skill critical hit rate and skill critical damage, since we're going to be running skill crit here. These two stats are the best ones you can have. And finally, let's get onto our weapons. Since this is a gun Valby build, the weapons are pretty important. Now, starting off with our first weapon, you actually have a choice between one of two weapons. So your first weapon will be a stat weapon that you're using just to use its ultimate ability / passive to get increased stats. So the first one you have is Blue Beetle, and then the second one is Peacemaker. Blue Beetle because it gives you increased skill critical hit rate, and Peacemaker because it gives you increased skill power. Now, the reason why you can use these, and we actually have multiple weapons, is thanks to your third ability. So your third ability, when you activate it, will copy whatever stats you currently have, even if those stats change on your character. Your third ability stats will never update past casting. Now, I will show examples of this and how it all works in the tips and tricks section, but this is why we're able to use our first guns and not care about the builds on them at all, but still use the passives while swapping to our second gun, which is going to be Thunder Cage. Now, there are multiple reasons why we're running Thunder Cage, but first off, we're not going to go super in depth into the Thunder Cage build. This is a build video focusing on Valby. I will show all the build for Thunder Cage on the screen there, but we're just not going to go super in depth over the build. Now, the reasons that we're running it is first off, Thunder Cage is just a really strong gun, so it just works out really well because it's strong. Second, it's a crit gun, and Valby's passive actually gives nice crit benefits to your gun, including increased critical hit rate. Something like, I think, 20%, which allows you to hit pretty high crit rates on your gun. And then the third reason is Thunder Cage hits really, really fast. It actually can get a capped out fire rate, which allows us to proc our third ability a lot. Not only that, your third ability technically needs at least 2 bullets to set up, because you have to first shoot once to apply the laundry passive, and at least a second time to apply washing. Now, washing actually has a 30% chance to go from laundry to washing, so you really want to shoot fast to get that guaranteed proc. That's why we want the high fire rate, which makes Thunder Cage just a really, really good gun. Now, technically, even though I'm not going to show these guns, there is a couple other options you could take for wave clear, though Thunder Cage will give you plenty of wave clear because your third ability has an AoE proc that does a lot of damage. You can also technically use Restored Relic and Exterminator because explosions also can proc laundry and washing, your third ability's passive, and trigger its increased damage. So those two guns are also really good, but Thunder Cage is definitely the best. Also, one little fun thing about Exterminator, its individual rockets can each proc Valby's third ability. Just a little fun thing. But once again, Thunder Cage is the best one. It'll give you your AoE and your boss killing. The rocket launchers are just good secondaries if you want to take those. And you can use any standard Restored Relic or Exterminator build. Will perfectly work with this. And finally, time for the tips and tricks section where I'll show you guys a few things kind of help you along with Valby's gameplay. And there's 3 things I want to show here, 2 big things, 1 minor thing. But let's start off with the thing I've kind of been talking about throughout this entire video, that if you don't really know, you'll lose about a lot of your damage, just like 2/3 usually. So let's first start by spawning an enemy. So there's a similar interaction with Combat Protocol Eugen that I go over in that video as well. But basically, if it is an infinite cast ability that's toggle on and off, it actually has a very interesting interaction, where it doesn't update the value after you cast it. Instead, what it does is it copies the values from your initial cast and just continuously uses that throughout the entire time the ability's going. So even if you lose a buff, it keeps the buff. Even if you cast a buff after you've cast that ability, it doesn't use it. So it keeps going the same as usual. The best way to show you guys this is, well, to show you guys this. So here, I'll get this going. So you guys can see it's about 3.3 there. Now we'll get Enlightened Mage set, and in theory, that should, well, increase the damage. Let the puddle disappear there. It's more visually able to see. And see, it's the same damage. Did not actually get buffed. That's because your third ability is using it from the initial cast. Now, if we do the same thing though, get our Enlightened Mage set going now, which gives us a huge buff, and then activate our third ability. Wait for the puddle to disappear again. Any second now. You guys can see it's at a much higher value, about 6 million there. And even though our Enlightened Mage set dropped off, it keeps the buff on our third ability. So our third ability doesn't even lose the buff. So this allows for a lot of cool interactions. That you can just basically set up all your buffs at the very start. And then keep them throughout the entire Onslaught match, as long as you don't turn off your third ability. You'll just keep all of them. And some people might think, well, maybe that's not enough. But it does allow for a couple cool interactions. Number one, we don't need cooldown to keep up Enlightened Mage set on our only damage ability, which allows us to do gap in time because we're not running cooldown. And that's a whole 35% increased damage while we still keep the benefit of Enlightened Mage set. But there's another really cool interaction here. So let's keep this up. So you guys can see, still 6 million. Now, in theory, you know, if it was the usual thing, you know, you could stack up. I have to use the cooldowns here just to make this fast. So, Peacemaker. Let's do that to get rid of that. Still the 6 million it was before. Now, if we... So we had that buff, but didn't do anything. Well, let's deactivate our third ability. We'll proc everything up again. Okay, now we got Peacemaker. We activate our third ability. Before it was around 6 million. Now, technically, when we swap off a gun, it should drop the buff. But in this case, don't forget, we keep the buffs locked in. Which means, as you guys can see there, it's now sitting at 7 million. Meaning we kept the Peacemaker buff, even when we're swapping guns, which allows for something really cool where we can stack all the buffs on, you know, let's just say our Peacemaker or Blue Beetle, because you can use either or. I personally like Blue Beetle because of the increased crit rate. And then you can just swap to Thunder Cage here and reap all the benefits. Where you get all the buffs still on your third ability, but you get the better gun. And this is just a phenomenal thing. That means you get the benefits of using a stat gun, but the damage of an actual good gun. And that's why this is such a cool interaction, allows you to do such insane damage. And yes, this also works with the buff cards in Onslaught. Don't forget, copies all of your stats. So you can also lock in the 100% increased damage on one of the Onslaught cards, which I've done before, and it's just incredible. Now, some people may be wondering, well, we're not running cooldown, so how do we actually update our third ability to get the Onslaught cards when we get a new one? Let's just say Stage 2. There actually is a way that we do that, and that's one of the things I'm going to show. That's the other big thing. But real quick, I'm going to show you guys the minor thing before we get to that big thing, because we have to swap to an entirely different zone. So the small thing I want to show you real quick is just how you get your infinite ammo going. So we'll waste some of our ammo here. So you have to be in your puddle. And you just have the proc your passive. So, and there's my ammo. It's fully back. You can do this with like any gun. You just have to be in the water. That's just a small thing I want to show you guys. So let's go ahead and jump to how you guys can reset your third ability for free to be able to reset up all your buffs for an Onslaught card. Okay, now for me to show you guys how to reset your ability for free without putting it on cooldown. And this is really important if you want to update your ability to have any of the buffs from an Onslaught card or any other kind of buff if you didn't start at the beginning. So, as you guys can see, my ability's active right now. I'm just gonna summon this guy because he's pretty much the only boss I know that is easy to get to that has knockback. So if you get knocked back, you guys can see my ability just got put on cooldown, or got taken off cooldown. Does it again. Come on, jump at me. And see, knocked back, and it's instantly freely put back on cooldown. So this is a way that you guys can reset your ability without having to worry about it going on a full cooldown. And see there, I can just activate my ability back again. And there's plenty of enemies in Onslaught who have knockback. For example, any of the enemies with the physical giant shield in front of them, if you just sit in front of them for a split second, they will swing their shield and they will knock you back. So this is how you guys can free reset your third ability. Otherwise, if you try to reset like this, it gets put on a 60-second cooldown. And that just doesn't feel good. Anyways, hopefully all those tips and tricks will help you guys while you're playing Valby. And that's going to go ahead and wrap it up for this Valby build guide. She's been an amazing carry for Onslaught level 3 and a lot of fun to run. But let me know what you guys think of the build down in the comments below, or if you have any questions, also go ahead and hit me up down below as well. And if you did enjoy the video or plan to use the build, I'd appreciate it if you could hit that like button. It really does help out the video a lot. And if you want to know when new videos are coming out, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Also, I do stream most days on Twitch. I'll go ahead and throw up the information on the screen there. We'll be doing a lot of Onslaught and checking out all the new patch. There's a lot of stuff to check out. It's a pretty good patch so far. And once again, if you guys could hit that like button, I really would appreciate it. It does help the video get out to a lot more people. But that's going to go ahead and wrap up this video. I appreciate y'all watching. I'll catch y'all again next time.